I spent 31 years in the railroad industry, and if that job teaches you anything, it's how to read the track ahead. You learn to spot the subtle curve before the bend, to feel the vibration in the rail that tells you something's wrong a mile before you see it. You develop a patience that most people mistake for stillness. You're not still, you're watching. I wish I'd applied that same attention to my own home. My name is Leonard Marsh. I'm 64 years old, and I live alone now in a 2-bedroom house in Knoxville, Tennessee, with a rescue beagle named Chester, and more quiet than I ever expected to want. But I want it. I earned it. Let me tell you how. I married my wife, Pauline, in 1987. She was 23 and I was 27, and we met at a church potluck of all things, which always made me laugh when people asked, because it sounded so impossibly ordinary. She brought a green bean casserole. I brought nothing because I didn't know I was supposed to bring anything. She pointed that out immediately, and I liked her for it. 31 years of marriage, 1 daughter, 1 house paid off, and what I thought was a life. My daughter Claire was born in 1991. She was the kind of child who made you believe you'd done something right. Smart, funny, stubborn in a good way when she was little. She played soccer. She had a gap between her front teeth until she was 13. I coached her little league team 1 season even though I knew nothing about softball. We lost every game but 2, and she still brought the trophy to my shop to show me. Somewhere between that girl and the woman she became, I lost the thread. I don't know when it started exactly. These things don't announce themselves, they creep. I looked up one day and my daughter was 30 years old and married to a man named Kevin, and everything in my life had quietly reorganized itself around what Kevin wanted. Kevin Stroud came into our family in 2016. He was 34, good-looking in the way that men who know they're good-looking always are, with the kind of handshake that's just a little too firm on purpose. He worked in commercial real estate and talked about money the way some people talk about religion, with total conviction and mild contempt for anyone who didn't share his faith. My daughter loved him. That was enough for me, for a while. The first few years were fine. Holidays, birthday dinners, the occasional Sunday at our house. I noticed things, the way he talked over people, the way Claire went quiet when he made a joke at her expense. But I told myself I was old-fashioned. Told myself I was looking for problems. Every father thinks no man is good enough. The money started slow. In 2019, Claire called to tell me she and Kevin were buying a house and they were a little short on the down payment. $40,000. I had it. I gave it without thinking twice because she was my daughter and that's what fathers do. I told myself it was an investment in her future. In 2020, Kevin had a deal fall through and they needed help covering 3 months of mortgage while he got back on his feet. $14,000. I wired it the same afternoon she asked. In 2021, it was Claire's car. The transmission. Then Kevin's car. Then a vacation to Scottsdale that they needed, their word, needed for Kevin's mental health. I paid for the hotel. I paid for the flights. Pauline never said anything against it. Pauline never said anything against Kevin, period, which should have told me something. What I didn't understand then, what I couldn't see clearly until much later, was that Kevin had done something very systematic to my family. He had made himself the center. Pauline liked him. Genuinely liked him in a way she'd stopped liking me somewhere in the late 2000s, though I hadn't fully admitted that to myself. Claire deferred to him on everything. Family plans went through Kevin first. If Kevin didn't want to come, Claire didn't come. If Kevin thought something was a bad idea, it was a bad idea. I was the ATM at the edge of the room, useful, peripheral. It was a Tuesday in October 2022 when my body sent me a message I couldn't ignore. I'd been having what I told myself was indigestion for about 2 weeks. I'm not a man who goes to the doctor. I know that's foolish, and I know that's a cliche, but I had a physical every 2 years, and I ate reasonably well, and I figured the discomfort was stress. I'd retired 6 months earlier and hadn't fully adjusted to the quiet. I was in my shop. I do woodworking, always have, and I was sanding a cabinet door when the pressure in my chest stopped being background noise. It moved into my left arm and then my jaw, and I sat down on my stool and I thought very calmly, this is it. I called 911 myself. The dispatcher stayed on the line and I unlocked my front door and sat back down on that stool because I didn't trust my legs, and I listened to sirens get closer, and I thought about a lot of things. I thought about Chester, who was asleep on the mat by the back door. I thought about whether I'd turned off the shop vac. I thought about my daughter. I did not in that moment think about Pauline. That's something I've sat with since. The EMTs got to me in about 8 minutes. They were good, calm, efficient, the kind of professionals you're grateful exist in the world. They told me I was having a cardiac event, and that was the last thing I remember clearly before the hospital. I woke up in a recovery room at University of Tennessee Medical Center. It was almost 9 in the evening. A nurse named Terry, a big man with a shaved head and kind eyes, told me I'd had a heart attack, that they'd placed 2 stents, and that the procedure had gone well. He said my family had been notified. I asked if anyone was there. He paused, just a half second, but I felt it. We've been trying to reach them, he said. I looked at the ceiling. The tiles had a pattern of small dots, and I counted them, slowly, while I worked through what that meant. They reached Pauline at 4:47 in the afternoon, according to what I later confirmed. My daughter was contacted at 4:52. The hospital called 3 times over the next 4 hours. What I found out later, pieced together from a conversation with my neighbor Darlene, who had her own sources, and later confirmed, was this. Kevin's 40th birthday party had been scheduled for that Saturday, but been moved to that Tuesday because of a venue conflict. The party was at a restaurant in downtown Knoxville. 40 guests, open bar. My wife attended. My daughter attended. When the hospital called the first time, Pauline answered, heard the word cardiac, and said she couldn't come right now. They were in the middle of something. She said to call back. When they called back, she didn't answer. On the 3rd call, my daughter spoke to a nurse and asked whether it was life-threatening. And when the nurse explained that I was in recovery and stable but that the family should come, my daughter said she would try to get there in the morning. I lay in that hospital bed alone all night. Terry, the nurse, came in twice to check on me, and both times asked if there was anyone he could call. I said no. I stared at the ceiling tiles and I thought about 40 years of decisions. My neighbor Darlene came by the next morning at 7. She'd seen the ambulance the day before and hadn't been able to get any information, and she drove over herself. She brought a plastic container of chicken soup that I will never forget as long as I live. She sat in the chair next to my bed and held my hand, and she didn't say anything, which was exactly right. Pauline and Claire arrived at 10:15 in the morning. Kevin came with them. He was wearing a fleece vest, and he had the look of a man doing an obligation, which I suppose he was. Pauline hugged me carefully, the way you hug a piece of furniture you're worried about breaking. She said she was sorry. They hadn't realized how serious it was. Claire cried, which I'm sure was genuine. She did love me, in her way, in the spaces Kevin left for it. She kept saying she was so sorry, she thought I was stable, she thought the morning would be okay. Kevin shook my hand. He said, "Glad you're still with us, Leonard." Like I'd done him a favor. I didn't say much. I was on blood thinners and I was tired, and my chest felt like someone had been sitting on it. And I looked at the 3 of them standing at the foot of my hospital bed, and something in me went very still. Not peaceful still, railroad still, the kind of still that comes before you start making decisions. They stayed 40 minutes. Kevin was the one who said they should probably let me rest, and both women agreed with him immediately. Pauline kissed me on the forehead on her way out. Claire squeezed my hand. Kevin said he hoped I'd be up and around soon. The door closed. Terry came in 10 minutes later to check my blood pressure. He looked at me for a moment and then said quietly, "You want me to see if there's a social worker on the floor?" I told him no. I told him I was fine. And I was, actually, because the stillness had settled all the way through me and I knew exactly what I was going to do. My older brother Ray is a retired estate attorney. He lives in Chattanooga, about 2 hours from Knoxville. Ray drove up the day after my surgery and sat with me for 6 hours. He brought real coffee and a yellow legal pad, and we talked. At some point, the conversation shifted from him being my brother to him being my attorney because that's what I needed. I told Ray everything, not just the Tuesday night, all of it. The 40,000, the 14,000, the Scottsdale trip. The slow reorganization of my family around a man who considered me a line item. Ray listened without interrupting, which is a thing he does that I've always respected. When I finished, he put down his coffee and said, "Leonard, how much do you think you've given them total over the last 4 years?" I did the rough math. It was over $90,000. Ray wrote something on his legal pad. Then he looked at me and said, "What do you want to do?" I told him. He nodded. He said he could have the paperwork started within the week. I want to be clear about something because I think it matters. I didn't make this decision in anger. Anger is a fire, and fires burn out. What I felt in that hospital bed wasn't hot. It was cold and clear and very, very certain. I had been a source of money, of goodwill, of quiet accommodation for years. And when the source ran dry, or rather when the source nearly died, the people I'd spent my life funding had lifted a glass of champagne in a downtown restaurant and not come. That told me everything I needed to know about the nature of the connection. I spent 3 weeks recovering at home. Darlene checked in every day. My old railroad buddy Pete drove up from Maryville twice, and we watched football and didn't talk about anything serious, and it was exactly what I needed. Ray handled things in the background. Pauline stayed home during my recovery, which I give her credit for. She cooked. She was attentive in a way she hadn't been in years, which I recognized as guilt doing the work that affection no longer did. I was kind to her. I didn't argue. I didn't reveal anything. I'm not proud of the performance, but I understood by then that I'd been performing too for a long time, and I was tired of doing it for free. In November, 6 weeks after my surgery, I had a conversation with my financial advisor, Tom Grisham, at his office on Kingston Pike. Tom and I had worked together for 11 years. He's a careful man, not easily surprised, but he raised his eyebrows a few times during that meeting. I moved my retirement accounts. I restructured the beneficiaries on my life insurance. Pauline had been the primary for 30 years. I spoke to Ray about the house. Because I owned the house outright, my name alone, purchased before the marriage and never refinanced into joint title, a detail that had seemed irrelevant for decades, I had options that many men in my position wouldn't. I also closed the joint checking account and opened a new one. I was careful about this. I moved the change gradually over 3 weeks, shifting what was mine to where I needed it to be. The joint account had been funded almost entirely by my pension and retirement withdrawals. Pauline worked part-time at a dental office, and her income largely covered her personal spending. The household, the utilities, the insurance, the property taxes, the groceries, that was me. When the joint account hit near zero, I left it open. I didn't close it, I just stopped feeding it. I want to tell you about December 14th because that's the day I left. It was a Saturday. Pauline had gone to get her hair done and wouldn't be back until noon. I'd been packed for 2 days, a careful selection, nothing dramatic, just the things that were actually mine. Clothes. Tools from the shop I'd built myself. My father's pocket watch, Jester's bed, his food, his leash. My laptop and the external drive where I keep 30 years of woodworking plans. I loaded the truck over about 2 hours. I moved slowly. I was still not at full strength, but I moved steadily. Darlene came over and helped me carry the heavier things. She didn't ask questions. She'd figured it out by then, or most of it. I left a letter on the kitchen table. I won't read the whole thing to you, but I'll tell you what it said in essence: that I was not angry, that I wished Pauline no harm, but that I was done. That what happened on October 4th, the night I had a heart attack and my family went to a birthday party, had clarified something for me that had been blurry for a long time. That I had spoken to an attorney. That the house would be sold and the proceeds divided per the agreement Ray had drawn up. that her personal accounts were untouched, and what was in the joint account was what was in the joint account. I said I hoped she'd be all right. I meant it. I drove to Ray's place in Chattanooga, where I stayed for 6 weeks while I found the house I'm in now. Chester sat in the passenger seat the whole drive, and every time I hit a long, straight stretch of I-75, I rolled the window down just enough for him to put his nose out, which is his favorite thing. I turned on the radio. I didn't cry until I hit Loudoun County, just for about 90 seconds, and then I was done. Pauline called that evening. I didn't answer. She called 3 more times. On the 4th call, I picked up and told her calmly that I was safe, that I had retained an attorney, and that all further communication should go through Ray's office. I said I wasn't angry. I said I wished her well. I hung up. My daughter called an hour later. That was a harder conversation because it was my daughter, and I sat in Ray's guest room and I held the phone while she cried and said she was so sorry, that she didn't know what had happened to her, that Kevin had said it would be fine, that she'd been telling herself I was stable. I said, "Claire, I know you love me. I'm not sure you chose me. And I need to live the rest of my life in a place where someone chooses me." She didn't have an answer for that. Neither did I. Not a good one. But it was the truest thing I'd said in years. The divorce was final in August of the following year. Tennessee is an equitable distribution state, which means marital assets are divided fairly but not necessarily equally, and because the house was my separate property and the retirement accounts had been restructured in legitimate ways by a legitimate attorney, the outcome was what Ray had predicted. Pauline received a fair settlement. I kept the house and sold it myself, adding to a nest egg that, honestly, was larger than I'd expected once I saw it all laid out without someone else's hand in it. Kevin, for his part, lost his real estate license in the spring. I won't pretend I was sorry to hear about it. The investigation had been pending for over a year, something involving misrepresented commissions and a few clients who'd caught discrepancies. I didn't cause it. I didn't need to. Men like Kevin tend to create their own reckonings. My daughter came to see me in September. She drove down to Knoxville alone, without Kevin, and we sat on my back porch and drank sweet tea and talked for 4 hours. She told me things I suspected and some things I didn't. I told her things too. We didn't resolve everything. Some things don't resolve. They just become part of what is. But we found a road back to each other, narrow and careful, that I think we're both still walking. I don't know what her marriage will become. That's her life. I do know she called last month on my birthday and we talked for an hour and 15 minutes, and at the end she said, "Dad, I'm sorry I didn't come." Just like that. No qualifications, no explanations, just the thing itself. I said, "I know, kid." And I meant that too. I want to tell you one more thing, because I think it's the part that matters most, and it's the part that's hardest to explain. I'm not bitter. I know that sounds like something a bitter person would say, but I'm telling you it's true in a way I can actually feel. I wake up in the morning in a house that is mine, and I walk Chester down a street where I know the names of my neighbors, and I go into my shop and I make things with my hands, and nobody needs anything from me except Chester, who needs a walk and his dinner, and occasionally someone to scratch his ears during thunderstorms. It's enough. It's more than enough. It's the first time in longer than I can remember that I've known the difference. 31 years in the railroad industry. You learn to read the track. You learn that the curve was always there, that you just had to look. I looked, finally, and I took a different line. There's a moment I keep coming back to. Not the heart attack itself, not the stents, not even waking up alone in that recovery room. It's the ceiling tiles, the small dots I counted while I waited to find out if anyone was coming. That's the image that stayed, not the pain. The counting. I think about what it takes for a person to end up there. 63 years old, lying in a hospital bed doing arithmetic on ceiling tiles because looking at the door hurts too much. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens the way a house settles, slowly, silently, one small give at a time, until one day you notice the floor isn't level anymore and you realize it hasn't been for years. What I lost that night wasn't just the feeling of being loved. I lost the story I'd been telling myself about what my life was. And losing a story you believed in for 30 years, That's its own kind of cardiac event. But here's what I've come to understand about that night. About all of it. What happened to my family wasn't an accident, and it wasn't a mystery. It was the natural result of choices accumulated over time by all of us, including me. I chose to keep giving without requiring anything in return. I chose to stay quiet when I should have spoken. I chose comfort over clarity again and again because clarity is expensive and I wasn't ready to pay. That's not self-blame. That's just honest accounting. When you see your own part in a thing, you stop being a victim of it. You become someone who learned something. Kevin didn't destroy my family. Kevin revealed it. There's a difference. And Pauline didn't betray me the night of the party so much as she confirmed something that had been true for a long time. That I had confused proximity for connection. Shared mortgage for shared purpose. Those are not the same things. I know that now. What stayed with me through all of it, the recovery, the paperwork, the long nights at Ray's house, was something I can only describe as a quiet kind of moral inventory. Not guilt, not blame. Just, who have I been, and who do I want to be for however long I have left? Claire asked me once during one of our porch conversations how I'd managed to stay so calm through everything. I told her I wasn't calm, I was clear. Clarity looks like calm from the outside. What I had to find, what I think anyone in a situation like mine has to find, is the courage to act on what you know is true even when it costs you something real. A house, a marriage, a version of yourself you've been carrying for decades. That kind of decision doesn't come from anger. It comes from a deep, quiet understanding that your life belongs to you and that the time you have left is not an unlimited resource. I think about Darlene showing up at 7 in the morning with chicken soup. I think about Ray driving 2 hours with a legal pad. I think about Pete watching football and not asking questions. Those people didn't save me from anything dramatic. They just showed me, by showing up, what choosing someone actually looks like. It's not complicated. It's not grand. It's just presence when presence is hard. That's what I want the rest of my life to be. Present. Clear. Chosen. Jester is asleep under my workbench right now. I'm sanding a rocking chair I'm making for no reason other than that I want to make it. The shop smells like sawdust and linseed oil, and it is completely quiet. I have never been more at home anywhere in my life.